Yes, snake snap. We can take snap at the end. So, hi everyone. My name is Sagar Kakkala. So here we're at day 3 session, like where we will dive into Kubernetes. And here, apart from like DevOps, I have content in like travel and finance and like other things. So here for DevOps, like be it Sagar Kakkala's website or YouTube, there are like few things that we had to do. It's just like to segregate content because it's a mix of content. You just had to remember my name, like Sagar Kakkala. And if you search in Google, you'll get my website, you'll get my LinkedIn, you'll get my YouTube. And here in website, everything is separated by contents of blog. And like whereas in YouTube channel, like everything is separated by playlists. It's not coming. Hmm. Yes, everything is separated by playlists. If it's English and DevOps with like Telugu and finance and other things. One second. Hmm. Okay, so here this session in Kubernetes, I would like someone who's watching on YouTube, I would recommend like to watch day 1 and day 2 because everything is interlinked here. We'll start directly. Here, since I wanted to club both the sessions, Kubernetes Imperative commands and Kubernetes session, I just kept things ready. All I did was I just kept EC2 instance that was ready and as well a ticket. Here what we'll do, like before going into Kubernetes, we'll create a Docker Hub account and then we'll push that Docker image which we created in day 2, and from there we'll start Kubernetes because in Kubernetes it's no more relied on code, it's everything, it's relied on Docker images. Here Docker Hub is a container registry. Similarly, just like Docker Hub, you have AWS ECR, Harbor, and a lot other container registries, like where you could put your Docker images there. Since Docker Hub is like widely known, now we will start with Docker Hub. Uh, yes, okay. Yeah, so we will start with Docker Hub, creating Docker Hub account. It's just simply search in Google Docker Hub and you will get this account. By default, Kubernetes search the images which are in the Docker Hub account. Else you had to, if it is in Harbor, you had to reconfigure it again, or AWS ECR, you had to reconfigure it again, like saying where it has to search image. But here Docker Hub is a public. By default, it searches in Docker Hub Kubernetes if there is an image. So first thing I'm doing is like to create an account in Docker Hub. Also, I would suggest like for this project or anything, like create a separate mail ID. I forgot to mention it on day 1. Here, what I did was created a separate mail ID. With this same mail ID, I created GitHub account, GoDaddy, and everything, and even SSL, like so that you are with the single credentials everywhere. Am I going too fast or is it fine? Let's say. Okay, great. We got this. I think is it in my profile? I forgot where the images are. Repositories. Yeah. Fine. We had a Docker Hub account. We'll see now. Yes, create a repository, and this is these are the commands that we need now. And before that, since like I asked you guys to have the day to Docker image, just like don't stop it, just like don't terminate it, just stop it. This is what I want you to do. Like start instance once the Docker Hub account is created. One second. Mm, yes, since I think last time we had this image. Okay. Okay, we had React Docker and React Docker 2, like both the images. I'll push React Docker. Here, actually, everything is in the blog. Like what's in the blog, that's the same I'm doing. And go. And here I took T3 X2 large because I want to continue instance. But if you guys want just for a project, there is a little bit of money that you have to invest because here, if you take like free tier, it will not allow, like it will create a lot of issues. So go for T3 medium, and you have to make sure you will turn off the instance if it's not required. And as I showed in the repo, oh, it must be crazy. Hmm. Docker images and this. Yeah, let me go for my instance based on this commands. Yes. And here I should have my username, Docker Hub username. Mm, yeah. mm, where is slash and repo name tag name. Okay, repo name I'm gonna give like React Docker, not React Docker. Let's say React Micro KTS instance. Yes. Okay, I press enter. Before it used to ask for password. I don't know. It changed, I guess. Fine. Yeah, login succeeded. Here I just tagged that Docker and now I actually logged into the Docker Hub account that I created. And now I will just push the image, sudo docker push and the repo. Gonna go- okay. Mm, it should have repositories. Okay, yeah, this one I created and this one which I pushed from EC2 instance. Everyone is clear till here, right? How we created Docker Hub account and how we pushed image. Till here, everything is fine, right?
Yeah, fine, Sagar.
Yes, Sagar.
Okay, we'll get into Kubernetes now. Like why Kubernetes came into picture is simply because let's say like last time on day two, we created Docker containers. If there are like multiple containers, managing Docker had become a bit difficult for them to, let's say, if one container runs on port 80, one container runs on port 8080, and another application must run on like port 6293. Managing each application via different ports had become a bit difficult using Docker containers. If it is one or two, that's fine. But since like in industries we'll have like thousands of microservices, so managing them was a bit difficult. And to address that, Docker Swarm as well came into picture. But Docker Swarm was not become widely popular because of its like effective use or something. But at the same time, Kubernetes came. Kubernetes, where we call it actually orchestration tool, not containerization. It's more like, let's say I don't have anything in shape. Fine. Kubernetes came as an orchestration tool. As an orchestration tool where it can orchestrate tags or like Docker containers to tell like what it has to do. I mean, we could control it like using a very simple commands. Mm, And because of its ease of use, actually Google was the one like who bought it, Kubernetes, and because of it, its very ease of use, it became widely popular. So, and like every application, like we deploy using it Kubernetes, and it's very easy compared to like Docker Swarm. So that's where like it's still now in every industry Kubernetes has been used. So we will now here in this project, like we will set up micro Kubernetes, not Kubernetes, which is actually, let's say, in the Kubernetes itself, you have AWS EKS and Azure Kubernetes and GKE, which is Google Kubernetes Engine, and even the Kubernetes you have Minikube and lot other things like which deal with Kubernetes itself, but the organizers were different. That's it. Since here, if I use AWS EKS, I had to use NAT gateway, like which will include costs for me. So that is where I'm not including AWS EKS or other Kubernetes. If I go for Kubernetes, I had to include one master node and another one as slave node. By default, like Kubernetes would not allow me to like run up pods on master node because it has some taints and tolerations policy. That is why it does not allow. And for this to happen, I had to take two EC2 servers, even be it like AWS EKS or even other things. So that is where like I went with micro K8s and like once the setup might be different from other Kubernetes, but once we like set up everything is the same, be it AWS EKS, AKS, the commands we use, or even the methodology is the same. So think like you're learning here Kubernetes itself, not micro K8s. It's just we are using different tool for setup. That's it. Yes. So one second. Let me turn on the server. Since this is done, I'll just exit. I don't need to exit. I'll just stop this instance. It's not needed anymore because I pushed Docker image and it's done. We'll go for deploy server. This thing I created using IAM accounts itself. Mm, let's see. Okay. Yeah, requested more CPU. I don't know why. Fine. Let me delete this better. Maybe I'll set up with T3X2 later. I'll take a different instance. Hmm, T3 medium is enough for it. I'm actually doing it in root. Arey. Mm, okay, finally it showed up. Fine. First thing I'm gonna do is to install micro K8s, like which is Kubernetes itself. And here I think yes, here you have micro K8s official page, which actually says the same. The same commands I copy pasted here.
సాగర్ లైక్ ఒకసారి ఇది స్నాప్ అనే కమెంట్ లో స్నాప్ అని యూజ్ చేశారు కదా.
Hmm. Hmm.
యా
Snap.
అదే స్నాప్ అర్థం కాలేదు సాగర్.
Snap it.
స్నాప్.
It snap. It is just like you have in repositories. Let's say you have yum apt update. Say mapped is a repository. Snap is a repository where you have packages. Snap is
ఓకే.
similarly a repository where it has this microKTS package. That's it.
It will use for only for Kubernetes.
No, there is Terraform and lot of packages are there. Inside Snap, you have microKTS.
ఓకే ఓకే ఓకే
Mm.
ఫైన్. యా.
Here I took these
ఓకే.
commands from here, official microKTS page. Mm. Yes. Here we are going to add this microKTS to Ubuntu group. Same commands, let's copy paste. Maybe this is something like where we are actually configuring micro KATS. I mean, like because it's a micro KATS configuration, we are telling get into like cube configuration. That's it. And we are actually adding it to Ubuntu group. This is just a setup, so nothing to worry. Each things has different setups. Here, because I added to Ubuntu, I just want Ubuntu to have place. So that is why where what we are doing is like we are log out and log in for a user to take place of that privileges. That's it. I mean, like Ubuntu user, we made a changes. Now for it to act, we are just okay. I did not take this. Hmm. We are just logging out from user and logging in back. That's it. And next, yes. So just checking whether microkate is installed or not, which is actually our Kubernetes. Okay, microkate. So we had successfully configured Kubernetes, like which is our kube system and everything. Here, like if you get for the commands, like everything, whatever you want in like Kubernetes, you'll have Kubernetes docs, just like you had microkate docs, let's say. I think can go for yes, deployment. This is official docs, kubernetes.io. Here, you'll have the code for it, like where you how to use this deployment. Like first, what we will do is we are going to like since in EC2 server we had already let's say this is EC2 instance. Imagine. And now inside this EC2 instance, we already had a Docker image that is in Docker Hub account. Let's keep that aside. And now we are going to like create a namespace first. Why namespace? A namespace is like isolation. Let's say you have, since everything in organizations will have in microservice architecture level. Let's say for cart there is a different isolation, and for like products there are different isolation, and for transactions data there is different isolation. So each thing we will keep in namespace so that one service does not affect other. It's simply like there is like one namespace and two namespace inside servers will create how many namespace you want, so we could create the same. So we are going to start creating a namespace, and inside this namespace, what we will do, like we will deploy our Docker image, like the React application. First thing is like you had to deploy it inside a pod. And in pod is just like, let's say in Docker last time we discussed, Docker there is an image, and to deploy that image we would deploy it in Docker container. The same thing here. In Kubernetes, like we'll deploy the image inside this pod. And this pod, if you have only one pod, let's say, if there is like Kubernetes and one guy, like let's say if the application can run only on one pod, but if but for some reason this pod stops and your application is gone, so that is where instead of pod we will deploy our application inside deployment. What happens in deployment is like you could specify number of pods you need, where we call it simply replicas. Let's say I'll specify two replicas, and what happens now, like instead of one pod, why is this not moving? Okay, fine. Instead of one pod, this guy would have two pods to access. Even if one of the pod, let's say even this guy was accessing application from this pod, and for some reason this pod got damaged, and Kubernetes is intelligent enough, from here it'll actually route to this pod, so that like your application stays available. So that is where like now we are going to deploy. First thing we are going to do is like use this deployment. You understood like why we are going to use deployment now, right? And first thing is we'll create a namespace for isolation before we continue on like building our application on Kubernetes.
సాగర్ అలాంటప్పుడు అప్లికేషన్ అనేది డౌన్ అవ్వదు కదా ఆ పాడ్స్ అన్న
No, no,
ఇప్పుడు
it will not get down. Yes, fine. Let's say here one more thing is since we had to we installed micro K8s, everything you had to attach the command micro K8s before as a prefix. Let's say you want to check how many number of pods are there, how many namespaces are there. So everything is micro K8s get pods. Okay, what is this? Okay, micro K8s kubectl get pods. Sorry. So no resources, but we want it to run in kubectl get pods because we want to get familiar with Kubernetes, not with micro K8s. So simply instead of micro K8s kubectl running 10 times, we will just use this alias command. It's like every time you use kubectl, the server would know that it has to use micro K8s kubectl. It's just like instead of this, I'm actually trying to use this command. That's it. You could actually like change it to even like k, like alias. Instead of kubectl, you could just keep it as small k, so that your commands are like very easy to type as well. So I'm just going. If it is micro k8s, we will use micro k8s as prefix. But I don't want to use that. I just want to get familiar with Kubernetes, so that is why I'm using alias. That's it. And now here is where deployment starts. The command is actually micro k8s kubectl create ns for micro k8s, because since we gave alias, so this command would be enough. Yes, we created namespace successfully. Second thing is where this deployment comes. You could actually use some deployment file, but here there are some changes that we had to do. Let's say I think I created a repo for it where you'll have it in Sagar Kakkala's world day 3. And here is the deployment. Hmm, Instead of deployment.yaml, what I want to do is like React demo. Okay, this is the one that I created namespace. It's fine. React deployment. It's the name of our deployment that we'll give. And here labels is used to connect between service and ingress, and how that happens I'll tell later. And here is where we had to change because our image name is no more this. And remember in Docker we opened a port 80. So inside container we are going to open this port 80 port, and now the image name is, what's the image name? Mhm. Yes, this is our image name. And the tag is colon latest. If you do not give anything, it will default take latest. Else you could mention the tag. Mm, okay, our terminal is already there. Fine. Mm, okay, now I pushed this. That's my GitHub. Mm. Here, this is our deployment file, like where we had got the image from Docker. Now it is just, let's say, there is like deployment.yaml, like where we are going to just like there is a command like kubectl apply. We'll just apply this and deployment.yaml. So this one, what it does, it'll go. I think how many replicas I kept, I did not see. Yeah, this one has like two replicas, so it'll turn up two pods. And in React microKTS namespace, and these are the labels like which are getting connected with these. I'll tell. Mm, mm, yes. So it created deployment. Now let's check the pods. And since it's a namespace, you have to specify -n React microKTS, else it will check the pods only in default. Let's say if I did not give like -n like where we're specifying namespace. If not, like there you'll see no resources. It's get like -n uh, is for namespace. And here, since we had deployed using uh, what do you call deployment, even if you delete the pod, let's say let me delete the pod -n. What is this? Because now Kubernetes is intelligent enough, what it will check is in deployment there are two replicas, but now since one is deleted, I had to turn up another one. So that's how like Kubernetes works. So making your application highly available. Meanwhile, while this is turning on, your replication traffic would be from this pod. Till here, everyone is clear, right? Why it comes. And now, let's say if you give wide, because everything here, if user wants to access your application, he will access via this pod, and this pod has this IP. But if you say, let's delete this again. Mm. Now, if you see, before it was like 10.190.4. This is where in this IP the user will be able to access application. When I deleted and restarted, I mean like when it got deleted, it changed the IP. So the user must access with this new IP itself. And to address this issue where the IP of the pod changes every time, like when there is a restart or something, that is where we will use service. And in service, you'll have a constant IP. Unless it's restarted, if even if the pods are restarted, the service IP would remain the same. Till here, everyone is clear, right? We'll get into service now. Let's yeah. Uh, let's go for service now. And here if I go for
Sagar,
yes.
Yeah, you have defined the YAML file, right? Deployment YAML.
Hmm.
In that, you're giving that replica is like two,
Hmm.
right? It's like default. We can give like a replica is the default word, or else we need to. It's like variable. Variable. It's I'm asking.
No, it's like default in document I showed you, right? Maybe like whatever is there in the document, you had to use that only. It has to know because that's how Kubernetes works. It's like in replicas. From this document itself, I copied that. It's just image
Okay.
name that I changed and
Okay.
labels
Like
that I changed.
see, if any pod like a replica is nothing but like pod you're telling, right?
Replications are, let's say, it's not pod, it's like duplications of pod, let's say, cloning of pods. Even if it's
Like
like
you're telling
replicas 3, if I kept, there will
back.
be 3 pods.
Okay. Okay. You're telling like backup, right?
Not yeah, more like backup. If one pod gets like some issue, meanwhile you'll get traffic from another pod, making your application highly available. I think I told
Okay.
here, right? Yes. Even if like one pod is down, let's say this pod is down, till
Mm.
then user will be able to access your website from this pod, so that your
Okay.
application is still available.
The traffic will automatically diverted to one port to another port.
Yes, it's automatically diverted.
Bro, will it create the different memory?
Uh, uh, I'm not getting it. Different memory.
Memory means it will create some storage for that separate pods.
It's not more like that. The separate storage, I wouldn't say, but it has some information that it stores in etcd. I think in etcd it will check like from control manager. There are different components of Kubernetes. I think that's a homework that I gave to know the Kubernetes architecture. So that's where like control manager comes and checks in the deployment, and it compares with etcd of the data that's present and the data that's missing. Let's say in this server, it checks the data is missing. One pod must be there and the data is missing. So control manager like goes and say, okay, the data is not right. There should be two pods, but there is only one pod. Let me turn up one pod again. So that is where even if I deleted one pod, it turned up another pod. If I did not use deployment, it will not turn up the pod. Okay, clear, right?
Yeah, yeah, bro.
Okay, let's go for service. You understood like why service is being used, right? Because every time we use deployment, like let's say the IP changes and we don't want to give the user the new IP every time. That is where we will use service. And in service, you'll have like four types: cluster IP, node port, external IP, and load balancer. Since here we'll go with, if you do not mention anything, by default, it will use cluster IP. Let's say if there is anything to change, okay, there is nothing to change. And here, this port is actually the port for service. And this target port is the port which you used in deployment or which you had turned up in this. So target port must be this port, container port. And here, how will it know that it has to go for that particular deployments only? So that is where labels come into picture. Let's say here specifications, and I selected selector was like app React demo. So this is a label. What I was saying was like an app React demo, wherever is there, that is where you had to like integrate with it. So here, here is where I had like mentioned the labels as app React demo. Sorry, here. So by default, service goes and checks wherever this label is there. So and these both will become a matchup. Got it right? How labels are used, and this target port is actually container port, and this service is actually port 80, which we will open like from the IP to there. Let's go for this. I think like since there is no change required in this service file, I'll just directly apply.
Sagar, one thing, one more question.
Hmm.
You're telling like for every deployment file we need this service file. You're telling.
No, I was telling why this service file is used because let's say if you keep only deployment and every time something happens or rollback happen or restart happens, IP changes and you
Yeah.
had to update this IP everywhere wherever you updated this IP. We want this IP to be constant so that
Yeah.
even the pod gets restarted or something, We don't want, let's say, maybe I have a diagram, I guess. Hmm. Let's say this is how we are now presently. Like there is
Yes,
AWS
sir.
EC2, and
Mhm.
inside we created a namespace, and inside like we created two pods, and two pods are opened at port 80.
Yes.
And now what we are trying to do is we are creating a service. And now
Okay.
instead of user accessing the pod directly, he will access the
Okay.
service,
Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
service will route to these pods. And
Okay. Okay. Got
this
it.
service IP would not change at all, so that like you could keep this IP anywhere you want.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yes, let me go. Fine. Since there is no change, I'm directly applying kubectl apply minus f. Okay, service is created. Now to get the service, kubectl get svc or service minus n react. So this is the cluster IP. Now you could see this is the cluster IP. Cluster IP, how it works is it works only on internal. Let's say apart from AWS EC2, you could not access it anywhere because it's cluster IP and it's local. And if you want to use it outside, there is something called node port where you could use it outside this EC2 instance, which I'll discuss at Prometheus. I'll just leave that to homework because I just don't want to waste time there here because I'm gonna cover node port again later. Let's say now I want to access the application. How I'll access? As I said, just for IP 10.152.183.175 colon port 80. So this gave us our application actually, which we are not able to see because there is some JavaScript issue, but the application is there. So every time you access this IP, cluster IP, what happens is this goes either to this IP colon 80 and this IP colon 80. And why it's going for colon 80? Because we told the service whenever like the IP you get with port 80, you have the target port. Like target is this React deployment, and inside that deployment we will target port 80. And for that port 80 itself, we opened our application. I think yes, this is where like target port 80 and sorry, not ingress. Here it's port 80. So till here clear, right? Like why container port came and service port came. And instead of like if you want to use it outside the browser, I would ask you to make one. There is type and mm, simply you could search for Kubernetes services and you'll have a documentation just like I searched for Kubernetes deployment. You'll have Kubernetes services, a separate document itself where they'll tell you how to use node port and external IP, and I think one load balancer. So these are like four different types of services that are available. By default, I'm using service because I'm going to use Ingress now. And yes, till service part is clear, right? For everyone?
Yes, Sagar.
Yes.
Yes, bro. Yes.
Okay, fine. Now, before we go to Ingress, because Ingress why we use is Ingress is for domain. Let's say just like we had a GoDaddy domain instead of IP. Let's say because every time we should not say user. Let's say if I'm going to give you like this, let's say my website itself, instead of sagarkakkalasworld.com, if I give you IP to use and a port to use, nobody would feel comfortable and nobody would access my site as well. So that is where like domains are important, and to access this domain we need ingress. Like in Kubernetes it's simply we use ingress. And let's go. And before we tell ingress, before we configure ingress, we had to do one thing, be it like in Kubernetes or anything. We had to install ingress controller pods. What these ingress controller pods do is, let's say you have n number of domains. Let's say this does not have these many APIs. Maybe you could think of yeah, let's say maps.google.com, and there is something called fonts.google.com. let's say I'm running maps.google.com and fonts.google.com, both in same server, and everything must go through one API. So what I would do is I'll have an Ingress controller domain. The domain is google.com itself. But when user accesses, let's say when user access fonts, you had to take him to this pod. And when if user access maps, you had to take him to this pod, like the different pod which shows this application. You are getting the idea, right?
Yes, Sagar. Yes, yes, got
Mm,
it.
mm. So inside the same domain, like be it like google.com, they had like different APIs for each API, like to route to which application that ingress controller takes place, to tell like what domain to go to which place. But since it's our single application, we don't need to worry about that much. But for sure, we need an ingress controller pods, and by default, Kubernetes has Nginx ingress controller pod. Uh, Else you could configure it on your own, but since like ours is a minor application, like we'll use this. I think yes. So I'm just enabling Ingress, like where it turns up Ingress controller pods. I think someone Arjun mute now. Thanks. So it enabled Ingress controller pod, the same thing like which Ingress does, but now we had to configure our Ingress. So now Ingress controller is ready. So in our Ingress, let's say
Ingress is inbuilt in the micro 8s, right?
everything is like inbuilt, but how you configure is that depends. Like let's say if Kubernetes, it uses this API. From these APIs, these get configured. Like if you go for like service, it uses API version V1. Like inside V1, like what to access. Like either it could be service, either it could be pod, or either it could be deployment. So API version for deployment, it's app slash V1. So everything is API version, just like Google had APIs like maps, fonts, you route it there. Just like you're telling Kubernetes inside this API version, this is the kind and this is the configuration I need. Same thing. Here inside Kubernetes, this is the API version that you have to check inside Kubernetes application. And from there, this is the kind I want you to check. You're getting now, right?
Yes, Sagar.
Yeah, I think like there is no change required as well. And here, what I'm telling Ingress is same thing. Here you go and like use this service. And what service? Service here I named it as like React service. So here I'm telling Ingress to go for React service and port number is 80 because in service we opened port 80. Service port is 80. So this is the port which you had to give there. What happened? Okay,
Meeting.
fine. Okay, okay, fine. Yeah, no worries. Maybe like a Kubernetes Imperative seconds won't take much. No worries. And here is the domain name, which is my domain, like haridev.shop. If you had your own domain, like you change it here. And here path type is prefix. Prefix is nothing but let's say whatever is before the slash, that is
Right.
prefix. And maybe I could show you this, maybe with the website itself. Hmm. Let's say whatever is before sagarkakkalasworld.com. If user accesses that, you take it here. But let's say if it is suffix, and let's say domain is sagarkakkalasworld.com only. If it is after suffix, if it is contents of blog, then you take the user to this application. Understood between prefix and suffix, right? Because it's a
Mm.
single domain, I just went to for prefix. That's it. So I think yeah, there is nothing to change here for me. The service name is the same, everything is same. Uh, I'll just apply. Maybe only thing I changed there was image name. kubectl apply minus f. Okay, and this ingress, maybe I had a diagram as well. Mm, mm, mm. Uh, arre- yes, this is how Ingress now works. Whenever user access Ingress, what it does, it's actually like targeting service with this port 80, and from this service targets the pods with this port opened. So clear, right? Ingress, service, and deployment. So we're done with this ingress. Now we'll check the domain. You could just say http colon slash slash. Mm, it's haridev.shop. Okay, let me give this IP. Yeah, let me give this IP in GoDaddy. Maybe. Hmm. Now I had to open port 80 because Ingress. Now I told it it has to go for port 80. So mm, mm, mm. I don't know if my Mac allows or not. Maybe I had to check. It's from every website. Hmm. Okay. Okay. They blocked me again. You guys could search haridev.shop. Maybe for me Mac, I don't know why it's blocking me. Let me know if you guys are able to see or not. Hmm.
Yeah, we can able to see.
You could share screen and show. Maybe like just for the recording.
Yeah.
Mm, mhm. Are you sharing screen?
Yeah, 1 minute. Mhm.
For me, how do I stop presenting? Okay, stop sharing. Okay. For me, I stopped sharing, right? Okay. Hmm. Okay. I forgot to change the code. Okay, I should have taken Docker image too, or I should have. But you guys understood, right? What we had done. So we had successfully deployed it in Kubernetes. So it's done now. Yeah, Megesh, you could stop sharing. Thank you. I'll share screen now. We'll just get into Kubernetes imperative commands. So yes, you guys are able to see my screen now. Yeah. Till here, like we had done using documents. Let's say like everything is picked from documents itself. But here in like be it like if you are going for CKA or like some Kubernetes certifications, like their time is constrained. And here, like every time being a DevOps engineer, like we don't want to check the documents and everything if it's inside the server, like it'll be easy. So that is where imperative commands come handy. Let's say this is same thing that we already did. And if you let's say if you had stopped and started the instance, this command will no longer work. And for you to work, like simply you had to keep that in like vi dot bash rc script. And once it's script, no matter how many times you stop or start instance, the bash script, I mean the terminal will already know this guy is typing kubectl. It means I had to give micro kts kubectl. I'm not going there now, since that like for it changes to effect takes place, as I said, like log out and log into user. From here is where like we'll start imperative commands. Let's say I'm creating a separate namespace for our namespace not to affect. Mm, ah, and now mm, yes, if you want to run a pod, let's say like starting what we did, like we had run our deployment directly using, And now, if you want to run a pod, simply you had to like instead of run, and pod name is whatever the pod name you would keep here, and image is nginx, but here we had used the image that we had generated in our Docker Hub account, and minus n in practice. Let's say now I created this account. Let's say kubectl get pods minus n practice. It's creating still. Maybe yeah, it got the nginx, but here if because I did not use this using deployment, let's say I delete this pod. And now, since it's no more under deployment, it's gone. That's it. Like if you do not go for deployment, your application is gone. Even if it is one replica, let's say deployment, you kept only replica one. Still then, your pod will be available. Your application might have like disrupting traffic because but particular second your pod is not up and nobody is able to access there. Yes, now let's go for it again. And next. And now, since I had like created using like I went and I checked documentation, right? What pod I used and like what are the files I used. And here, instead of going till documents, you could just click on this. I mean, like uh, just an extra command, dry run is equal to client minus OYAML. So what this does is like before it does not run the command, it does not create the pods, but it will tell what it's going to do. Simply, you could actually like copy this file and make your changes in a way you want it. That's it. And but here since what do you call? It's just a like terminal output, and we want to make changes. What we had to do, we had to keep this inside a file and then make changes. So for that, we will just append this to another file. Or maybe I had the command itself. Yes, here it's manifest.yaml. So I'm appending it to a manifest.yaml and then make changes there. It did not create a pod now actually. It just appended a file, and I'm going just going to like vi manifest.yaml, and here is where I'll make the changes, be it like image name, whatever it is, maybe my Docker Hub account image I would use here. So that's where I'll use make the changes, and I'll run the pod again like kubectl apply minus f manifest.yaml. Yes, where is this? Yeah, this is what I was saying. Manifest.yaml, make the changes and kubectl. And since if you're not sure like what to do, I mean like you remember only half of the command, even that's fine. Let's say kubectl run dash dash kel because Kubernetes no run in the sense like we use it only for pods. So you have with examples like whatever it is, you could experiment it. Like you have with examples like what each does. It will tell like directly like Nginx is the pod name and Nginx is this. And if you want to open the particular port inside, just like we had opened the port 80, you have that. And even if you want like pod namespace to be which even environment variables if you want like everything, you'll have with example just with simple command called help. Similarly, if you want to create service, since here we used manifest files, but if you don't want to use manifest files, this is the one. I think I gave wrong command, I guess. Okay, I had to give what I want to create, cluster IP. Okay, create cluster IP, let's see. Cluster IP dash dash help. Yes, here it gives you with examples. Where is this? It was like going file name. Okay, fine. Let's say like whatever the files like which we used in the repo, these are called manifest files. So you would Kubernetes manifest files. That's it. Yes, where is this? Now, and if you just want to check logs, this is the one to check like what if your application is not up and you want to check the logs. So that is where we will use this. So what our pod was running, that's it. Mm. And let's say you had already run up a pod and now you want to change the image on the running pod. And for that to do, you'll just have to like use this command like edit pod, because pod is already running. You could actually edit the running pod itself. Make changes in a pod that's running. Even the same way, it's not just for pod, it's for deployment, service, ingress. Anything you could use like using imperative commands. Maybe I could change the like uh, mm, let's say image nginx. Instead of that, let's say alpine. I don't know if I'm giving the spelling right or wrong. Maybe if spelling is wrong, if it is not able to find it inside Docker Hub, it will say I can't find it. So maybe that's something wrong. Mm, Get pods minus n practice. Okay, it got crash loop back off. Maybe the image name that I gave was not right, I guess. Simply if this comes, a crash loop back off or like restarting something, you could actually check the logs itself, describe pod of what's happening. Minus n practice. So it said successfully pulled image alpine and 9 image size. Something it failed. Yeah, but you understood like how we could actually do this, right? On the running pod itself, to name change. Yes, I'll just delete this pod. Okay, I gave for deployment as well and cluster IP as well. Okay. Yes. And here, one thing you had to remember is if you delete namespace, entire things inside namespace would get deleted. Let's say at the starting, like we created React microKTS namespace, and inside that we had deployment inside for React, Ingress, and service, right? If you delete the namespace, completely everything would be wiped out, or your application is wiped out. Yes, you're clear on the imperative commands, right? I think we are done now. Let me know if you have any questions, because other things were just in the block and it's pod deployment service, so you can experiment with these imperative commands as well. Yes. Uh, I think yes, we're done with the session. I'll stop the recording now.
Bro, these services like in Docker we have networks, right? Same like that.
Yes, 1 second.